For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Scott Hahn, so it's nice to meet you and welcome to our office. Thank you, Vince. So tonight, obviously, I really want to help you guys understand more about how to stay healthy during the upcoming holidays. I think the first year I taught this class, I think I did it in December, and I was like, okay, way too late because I missed Halloween. we got to get ahead of the game. So since Halloween is in a week, about a week away. I know, time flies, doesn't it? So, and then Thanksgiving will be here in a blink of an eye, and then Christmas as well. So tonight, really, I'm going to go through a lot of information. I have a lot of stuff to get through, but I want you guys, obviously, to learn. So please ask questions. If there's something you're not understanding, please let me know. I'll do my best to help explain it. If I can't, we will find an answer for you. So let's get started. So what is health? How do people define if they're healthy?
If they're not sick.
If they're not sick. How do you know if you're healthy, though? Aside from not being sick. Good. You feel good. Any other answers? No? No pain?
Energetic.
What was that?
Energetic.
Energetic. I like that because that's actually having something versus not having something. So the reason I ask this question is because this is really where our consciousness is at. This is how we define if we're healthy or not. We feel good, but how many people know of someone where they felt great, they went in, got diagnosed with stage 3 or stage 4 cancer? Was that person healthy? No. So just because you don't have symptoms, just because you're not feeling bad, doesn't, or maybe just because you're feeling it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy. So really, what is health? I want you guys to understand this, and this is the World Health Organization's definition. It's basically a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not just merely the absence of disease. So if you think about that, it actually is something versus defining it, but not as opposed to the lack of something. So if you were trying to define, what a square was, you would be, well, it's not a circle, it's not a rectangle, it's not a triangle. It's like you never defined what it was, and that's how we, look at health, where it's like, oh, well, we feel good, or we're not sick. So the lack of symptoms doesn't equal health. So where are we at in the U.S.? The top number, the 2.9 trillion, that is trillion. There's a lot of zeros there for those of you who are trying to count that up. That's how much we spend on healthcare every single year. That is a lot of money. 17.3% of our gross domestic product. That's another huge chunk of the economy, basically. So $7,800 per person. This is the other one that kind of surprised me. Is our healthcare system's the size of China's economy. You're like, okay, that's a lot of money. And then if you take a look at it, basically we make up we take 65% of the world's meds, but only make up a very small percentage of the population. The reason I bring this up, because I just want you to think a little bit differently about this, is because if taking drugs and spending money actually got you healthy, how much healthier should we be than the next country below us? Pretty significantly. Because when you start looking at the numbers, if we're taking so many drugs, I don't know if there might be, but we're by no means the healthiest country in the world. We're not even close. This one surprised me too when I saw this one. $1,600 of every car that GM sells goes directly to healthcare. So just think of the overhead that you're paying for, because that's what you're paying for when you're buying cars. And this is just GM. Toyota. All these other companies have similar sorts of expenses as well too. So, what do we really get for all of that? So so this is kind of what I put these up here. So for all this, so going back to this, so we spend obviously the most of the money, stuff like that. Where do we actually rank in healthcare?
My recollection is that we're not doing so great.
Not doing so great. That's a good recollection. So we rank 39th as far as our health care. We rank 72nd for actually things that we do for our health. But why is it when you take a look at our medical system, why is it held so far up here? And the reason is because of our emergency medicine. Our emergency medicine is number one. But the problem is everyone in the country is constantly waiting until that emergency. We don't actually, the rest of the medical system, we're not taking care of ourselves. Not only that, but it's like, okay, well, your cholesterol high is, well, here's this med. It's like, oh, your blood pressure high, here's this med. And the problem is like, just lowering the number doesn't create health. So, and they've also shown too, you take a look at obese people, if you're obese and you're exercising and you're doing the right things, but your weight is still elevated, your morbidity and mortality is that of someone who's a normal weight. So just numbers, you know, it's more so what you're actually doing for yourself, what you're doing to be healthy that actually creates that. So, question?
I'm sorry, what's the number one for years of potential life loss?
I won't make that.
Oh, so sorry.
No. So I was just about to run through this. So basically what number one for potential years life lost basically means compared to any other industrialized nation, we're dying younger than any other industrialized nation. So we're losing our lifespan basically. Not only that, but the quality of our life. If you take a look at kind of our end years where people are at now, the quality of life is horrible. The number of meds they're on, the debilitating stuff that they're on, dementia, Alzheimer's, all these things are going skyrocketing through the roof. And the U.S. is unfortunately, we're leading, you know, we're basically leading the world in all these chronic debilitating diseases. Why? Is because we're not doing anything up to that point. Not only that, but we're living in a stressed out world. We're not eating right. We're not exercising. So it's pretty much like if you took a look at it, it's like everything that you would do to really make a sick society is basically what we do. So leading cause of bankruptcy in the U.S., that one kind of surprised me. Because when they actually take a look at bankruptcy, only 6% is rated relative to credit card debt. The vast majority is relative to medical expenses. And what also surprised me too is the vast majority of those people had health insurance. So that wasn't the people where they just like, okay, I'm ignoring, ignoring whatever law was passed now that you have to have, insurance, stuff like that. These are people who had insurance. The vast majority of those people had insurance. It's just, they find ways to limit it stuff. Stuff got worse than they were expecting. And it's just, to me, it's just like, that's frustrating too. Basically, 39th in healthcare, we talked about that one. 49th in longevity. So there's 48 other countries in the world that are living longer than us. And the generation born now is not expected to live as long as their parents are. And that's the first time in the history of the world that has ever happened, which is pretty surprising to me. And when I actually took a look at the number, it was even more surprising when I looked at the number of years that actually they're expected to live less, which is 5 years. And that's just not like, okay, well, maybe a month or two. That's like a small increment. No, this is 5 years. So that's the equivalent of moving to Mexico, basically. That's a lot of, that's pretty detrimental in my mind, that it's like, okay, our kids who should have basically the best potential future for themselves, they're not expected to live as long as I am, or you guys are. They take a look at people age 65, basically age 65 now. They're not as healthy as their parents were at that same age. So, and I look at that, it's like, well, if that's precedent is already been set up, where am I going to be when I get to my parents' age? Where do you want to be when you get to where your parents are at or were at? Or maybe they didn't make it to age 65. And what are you doing different now to have a different outcome? What are you doing now so that way you don't suffer the way they did for maybe the last 10 years of their life? What do you want that to look like? And that's kind of why I go through this, because a healthy immune system is so much more than just one aspect. You can't take the immune system out of the body and say like, okay, this is just the immune system. It's all interconnected as far as health goes. So this is another one too. The medical system is the leading cause of death. When they took a look at all the different like comorbidity, core mortality, stuff like that, hospital-acquired infections, wrong drug for the wrong disease, even right drug for the right disease, when they started adding all those numbers up, this is the number that they came up with, 783,936. And I used to just kind of like rag on this a lot and talk about this a lot, but really what does this tell me? We are a sick society. is because we don't know how to take care of ourselves, that we're getting to the point that we need these drugs, that we need the medical system to try to create some sort of miracle for us, so that way we can survive through our heart attack or survive through whatever other horrible situation we self-inflicted upon ourselves. So if I look at this, it's like, that's what this number doesn't include, but it's like we need to start to create a shift. We need to start to create a change for ourselves. So, and the other thing too, though, is, each illness study, basically, so when they took a look at like Alzheimer's, basically all the disease stuff, when there was the higher mortality rates were found in regions with the most intensive care. So people who had the most medical care in those regions, they were the most likely to die. And that's the one that that one really tells me too that the system is flawed. I don't know them, I'm sure there's probably some out there, but I have tons of medical doctor friends, and I can tell you right now, they are doing their best to try to help their patients, serve their patients. But the reality is when you're dealing with a flawed system, it's hard to have the outcomes that you're looking for. And that's where we take a look at this, is the more drugs, the more intervention someone has, the worse the outcomes. So here's behind the scenes, what has really led to this. So we take a look at this, only 15% of medical interventions are supported by scientific evidence. And when they actually took a look at like the drug research stuff, so much is political in nature. What gets published, what doesn't get published, what's capable of being published in which journal, because JAMA and the British Medical Journal, which are considered probably some of the two basically best medical journals out there, they have certain things where it's like it has to be this type of drug, this type of thing, because I know the researchers out there, and it's like they have something phenomenal that could be life-changing for these patients, but they're like, well, that's not who our subscribers are. And that's the challenge is you're basically, literally the medical journals are much more political in nature relative to what they can actually publish versus actually true science. And that's what they're finding out more and more and more now. Who does the study? Who funds the study determines the outcome. Because there's books on how to lie with statistics. How do you manipulate the data to show some sort of positive outcome? With Prozac, they had to redo the study 8 different times to actually find a group that it would actually outperform the placebo. Every other test that they did, the first 7 of the 8, actually the drug did worse than the placebo, which means it was causing damage. And then they find this population that did good, and then that's where the studies start to happen. That's how they get their drugs published. And that's just one of many drugs. And that's what concerns me, is it's like thing after thing after thing. It's like, when do you put the patient safety and patient health in front of corporate profits? And that's really what to start to think about differently when you're making your decisions of, even though this might be the best information I have, the medical doctor's is a good chance they're not even dealing with the best information, because this stuff is virtually impossible to sift through, and that's what they're really teaching you. So when they took a look at kids, almost 80% of kids got hospitalized if they got drugs that really aren't approved for them. A third of those were life-threatening reactions that they ended up having. 73% of off-label use lacks evidence. When they started they actually took a look at medical journals like from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they took a look at like, okay, of these drugs that were supposed to be groundbreaking, life-changing, all these things that came to fruition and they came to pass. What were they looking at? And what they found out was that a good chunk of those research articles, they weren't even able to replicate. They weren't able to reproduce the study that study got published on. So the next time it was published, it's like, okay, well, the results, sometimes, like you get Vioxx and Celebrex, well, that stuff was just fabricated in the first place. But when you end up with stuff like that, it's like, how can you possibly make a good decision? Because no one hears about the study that's done 5 years later where it's like, oh, well, the drug isn't performing as well as we thought. Or this isn't doing as well as we thought it should. But everyone hears on the news where it's like, oh, new groundbreaking drug for such and such and such and such. And that's where it's like you start getting all this. And we're also one of 2 countries in the entire world that actually allows for direct-to-consumer marketing for drugs. The other one is New Zealand. And we've been pushing Canada for a long time, or I should say the pharmaceutical company has, to try to allow that. And basically, Health Canada is just like, no, because we haven't, it's the fact that you're doing this, that doesn't actually show better outcomes in the patients, and if anything, it actually shows worse, because you have patients coming in basically thinking they have these symptoms, or kind of basically fabricating this because they want this drug. And then what you have is you have a patient who's on a drug for a disease that they don't actually have. It takes the whole aspect of the system out of balance into there. So the other one too is the FDA database only catches somewhere between 1 and 10% of the drug-induced side effects. That's what they admit to. So I mean, it could, when you take a look at these drug studies and it's like, okay, this many people died of this, or this many people are going to get this, you can typically add a 0, if not 2 zeros after that, and that's going to be more likely where the actual number is going to be actually at. So I think I probably have already talked about this a little bit, and hopefully you guys probably are getting the point by now. You know, who's responsible for your health? And it's really, you got to be your own cheerleader, you got to be your coach, you got to take responsibility for decisions. I mean, as much as we know here, it's like, I can't choose what food is going into your mouth. I'm not sitting there holding the fork. I'm not, you don't have a feeding tube in there that I'm feeding that. Too, so it's just like, you know, at what stage do we start learning to say, hey, you know, let me start taking better care of myself because I want to be healthier than my parents. So we already talked a little bit about this, you know, really what is the real issue? It's, you know, our reliance on the medical system to actually create health for us, because health doesn't come from the outside in. Health comes from the inside out. What do I mean by that is you can't take a drug, you can't take a pill to create a shift within the system. I mean, you might be able to modify blood chemistry, but it's not actually creating health. Exercise, diet, all these things, which I'm going to go through in a little bit, that's where the health comes from. Not only that, but if you take a look at medicine, it's like, you know, how long have they been searching for the cause of cancer? I mean, how many billions of dollars have gone into that? And you know, what have we found out? I mean, the thing is, if you start to understand how the body works, basically, is that, you know, there isn't one single cause for every single disease. It's not how the body works. You can have multiple different causes, and then what ends up happening then is the disease gets expressed within the system. So really, the disease is an expression of the environment that the person is living and putting themselves into. That's what they're finding out with genes. Genes are, we used to think they were deterministic. Now we're finding out that what you're doing, how you're eating, how you're moving, how you're thinking, all those things are influencing how your genes are being regulated. And literally, you can turn genes on and you can turn genes off. Dean Ornish did a study basically where he took a look at men with prostate cancer. And it's like prostate cancer is one where medical intervention just isn't that great. So what they typically do is watchful waiting. And he said, well, as opposed to just doing watchful waiting, which is what you're going to do anyways, let me see if I can make some modifications here. So he changed their diet, had them exercise, and had them start meditating, changed positive influences for them. And what he was able to do is basically turn off 453 negative genes and turn on, I think it was like 58 positive, like basically turning on tumor suppressing genes. So now it's just through basically diet and lifestyle modification. So think of the long-term impact that someone's person's body would have if that is what your lifestyle looked like your whole life. You know, what do you think? Do you think that person, if they say your child or your grandchild, if they were able to start those habits now, you know, what is their life going to look like 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road? And that's what I want to really help to start, you know, shift the consciousness in this community so we can really start to make better decisions. Not only that, so people can actually understand what a better decision looks like. So, you know, we already talked about that. Basically, disease is the expression of, you know, the environment that we're living in, and you know, really we haven't learned how to take care of ourselves. So, you know, what does the future hold? You know, more of the same does not work, doesn't equal basically a better result. And this one too is, you know, a third of Americans basically believe that if you have access to advanced technology, advanced medical care, they can cure anything. And I think the older someone gets, I mean, being in the healthcare field, and we see, you know, thousands of patients basically into there, but you know, the older you get, the more you realize like this is just a falsity into there. It's like there's some pretty significant lacking into there. It's like once you get the disease, it's a lot harder to get rid of it than preventing it. So this is one of my favorites because I love Einstein. I think he obviously had a lot of great contributions to physics and stuff like that. But you know, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is basically the definition of insanity. And that's really where our medical system is at, is we're just trying to dump more money in, do the same thing over and over again, but it's not going to create a different result until we change the level of thinking that created that problem. So let's talk a little bit about the flu, because that's part of staying healthy during the basically this upcoming holiday season. People, that's part of, if you're not healthy, your immune system's down, colds and flus, this is one of the things that pops up. So, I mean, I think everyone in here has probably had the flu, highly likely they have. You feel miserable, you might have the coughs, body aches, fevers, stuff like that. The thing that I want to bring to your point though is, there's about 200 to 300 different viruses that actually cause flu-like symptoms. And if there's that many different viruses, and then you start taking a look at like the flu shot and stuff like that, which is trying to target one specific strain, one specific thing, it's like, wouldn't it make sense, like, let's get the system as strong as possible before trying to say, okay, let me just target one little thing. Because if you miss here, you missed. If the system's strong, it doesn't matter what you throw at it, it's going to be able to adapt and survive and get through it. So the CDC says about 40,000 people die of the flu every single year. Unfortunately, when you actually go to their website, it says there's about 1,000 people who die every single year.
Yeah, really?
Really? So where is the disconnect here? How can they get away with, what I consider false advertising? And the reason is, when you hear this 40,000, what they'll say is, this is flu and pneumonia. But what you don't realize is the vast majority of this number is pneumonia, which is definitely something that frequently follows the flu. But the reason why I bring this up, which we'll talk about just in a second, because I am going to talk about the flu shot tonight. I think some people have probably come here to possibly learn a little bit about that. But my goal here tonight is I'm not going to tell you one way or another to go. The goal is to really educate yourself. I want you to make the appropriate decision for yourself. That's really what it comes down to, is an educated decision. And a lot of people, including medical doctors, just aren't aware of the research, aren't aware of the science that's out there, and really the impact that this stuff has. So here's the flu shot. What does it contain? It basically contains, every shot basically contains 25 micrograms of mercury. Does anyone in here know what the EPA safe level for mercury is?
Probably like 0.
It should be 0. There's some political stuff that bumped the number up, but even with the political bumping it up, it's 6 micrograms. Not 25, 6. So when you get a flu shot, unless you weigh 550 pounds, you're getting well over your daily intake of what mercury should be. Mercury is a neurotoxin. It causes damage to neurons. It causes damage to cells. It's a known contributing factor into Alzheimer's. Other things that are in there, there's formaldehyde, there's aluminum, there's heavy metals in there that are creating issues. There's basically phenol, there's ethylene glycol, which is antifreeze. There's antibiotics in there because if they're sticking the needle in there, they need to make sure that that vaccine is staying sterile. It's grown on eggs, so the challenge when you grow any product, basically any of these vaccines, on any of these different mediums, if you want to call it that, they're all, as far as I'm aware of, currently involve some aspect of either monkey tissue kidney or kidney tissue. They have one now where it's like grown on like dog kidney stuff. There is, yeah, it's pretty gross. What also too is the flu shot itself, there's aborted fetus tissue involved in the creation of it as well too. So independent of maybe where I shouldn't say maybe your religious viewpoints are, that might be something for you to worthwhile know, that it's like, hey, it's like, I see some of these, these churches out there and they're promoting, get your flu shot, and it's like, there's such a significant contradiction because they don't even know what's in the shot and what went into creating that. It's like aborted fetus tissue, and it's in your flu shot, and you're injecting into the population something that you're completely morally against. It's like that. It's something where it's like educate the community, help them understand more about what the decision you're making. So also too, but when it is grown on these different mediums between eggs, dog tissue, like monkey tissue, stuff like that, what do you get? You get foreign viruses. You get foreign proteins. And those viruses are virtually impossible for them to filter out. And what do? They find it years later. It's one of those where they know, like the SV40 virus, it was injected in with, unknowingly injected in with the polio vaccine. What are they doing now? They're finding it in kids who, or I should say like the children and grandkids of someone who got vaccinated with this. So what it's doing is that virus is being transmitted vertically, and because it's not in, they're actually, they're testing for it now. So it's not in those vaccines. So those are things where it's like, okay, what are you going to find out later down the road? What's going to happen where it's like, oh, well, we should have known this. It's like, well, you do know that. You're just turning a blind eye. So basically the flu shot, if you get 5 consecutive flu shots, you're anywhere, like, and this is like year after year after year, you're anywhere from 25% to 10,000 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. Why is that? Is because it basically increases the inflammatory response within the system. They have to, with any vaccine, what they have to do is they have to create an inflammatory response. That's how they get the immune system to respond. So if you're creating an inflammatory response and then you're injecting heavy metal into it, that heavy metal becomes much more neurodamaging, is the way I would describe it. So a lot of people don't know this too. So who are the at-risk people for dying from the flu? Elderly. Who else?
Children.
Young children.
People that have immune compromised systems.
Exactly. So if you take a look at every single one of those populations, and I'll go through the research just in a second, every single one of those populations, the flu shot has very little effectiveness for them. When you take a look at basically people age 65 and older, only 30 to 40% of them even have an immune response. And basically what they did is they took a look at, like, if the years where they were able to get one strain basically matched exactly to the strain that they were hoping it for, so say the flu shot matched exactly, there was only a 9% effectiveness in that population. So what they needed to do is, when it was a perfect match, they needed to vaccinate basically to prevent one case of the flu, you needed to vaccinate 35 people. When it wasn't a perfect match, you had to vaccinate 100 people, in theory, to basically prevent one case of the flu. And what I'll show you in a second is the research that shows, okay, so we talked about how the flu commonly leads to pneumonia. Well, what they showed is getting the flu shot doesn't decrease your risk of pneumonia. I'll show you in a second too how actually getting the flu shot can actually increase your risk of actually getting additional flus, ones that don't match the strain. Not only that, but what they also showed too was that if you do get the flu shot, if you get a different flu, that flu is more likely to be more significant, more detrimental, and basically you're going to be laid up for longer.
Well, they have another shot for pneumonia.
And they'll have more shots and more shots. The problem is every single one of these viruses is constantly adapting. That's what they do. That's how they're basically designed to adapt in that sense. So it's like you get one. That's why the flu shot is never a very great match. So not only that, but what a lot of people don't know too is it puts your immune system into a different immune response. Puts it into a Th2 response versus a Th1 response. One is cell-mediated versus humoral. Simple answer is it's short-term versus long-term immunity. So if you get the flu and that flu comes back in 5 years, you're going to have more protection. If you get the flu shot, that flu comes back in 5 years, basically what the research is showing, you're going to have worse protection from that than if you didn't get the shot at all and never even got that flu that year. So every year it's a guess. They try to take a look at, see what's in Asia, what's in Europe, stuff like that, and that's what they're trying to combine, and then they say, okay, this is what we're going to stick into this year's flu shot. Well, if there's multiple different viruses that cause basically flu, I mean, you're always there. It's virtually impossible for them to get it right, and now you're injecting this neurotoxin into your system. So what they found out too is people in Canada, basically, when the year that the swine flu was going around, if someone actually had gotten the flu shot that year, they were twice as likely to get the swine flu. So. And what do they say? It's like, oh, well, get your flu shot because it might protect you from a different flu. So let's take a look at some of the research because, sadly, I don't have all this memorized to be able to recite it word by word. So I'll probably be doing a little reading here. But basically, take a look at this. I mean, I apologize. There's a lot of words here. So for those of you who eyes aren't as great, it's late at night, stuff like that, I'll be reading a good chunk of this. But basically, what they found is The current review in question looked at the effectiveness of immunizing nursing home workers to protect the elderly in their care. Basically, after reviewing multiple studies, really what they found out was that not basically giving the flu shot to nursing home workers did prevent the flu in the elderly population in that area. Not only that, but they also found too that had no decreased risk of preventing pneumonia cases. So really what was the effect of that? So there was no decreased risk of flu, no decreased risk of pneumonia. Second, the next study basically. Study published in October 2008, Archives of Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine found that vaccinating young children against the flu had no impact on flu-related hospitalizations or doctor visits during the 2 recent flu seasons. The researchers concluded that the significant influenza vaccine effectiveness could not be demonstrated for any season, age, or setting examined. Next one, another 2008. This one is in the Lancet, found that influenza vaccination is not associated with a reduced risk of pneumonia in older people. This also supports an earlier study in the New England Journal of Medicine. So research published in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine also confirms that there has been no decreased risk in death from influenza and pneumonia in the elderly, despite the fact that the vaccination coverage among the elderly has increased from 15% in 1980 to 65% now. So if we weren't vaccinating then, and we're vaccinating pretty massively now, you should see those numbers decreasing, but we're not. And if anything, they're actually increasing. 2007, research with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease and National Institutes of Health published this conclusion in the Lancet, basically. We conclude that the frailty of selection bias and the use of non-specific endpoints, such as all-cause mortality, have led to cohort studies to basically greatly exaggerate the vaccine benefits. That's their words, that they're basically saying is they basically, through statistics, through numbers, they over-exaggerated, really the true benefit of it. Large scale, so this was the Cochrane database. What did the Cochrane collaboration do? What do they basically take a look at kind of all the different studies that are out there relative to some sort of given condition, and then they kind of combine it together to create like more of a meta-analysis. Basically in 2006 they found that no evidence that the flu vaccine is any more effective than a placebo in children. The study involved 26 to 260,000 children ages 6 to 23 months. In 2007, a study published in Annals of Medicine concluded that getting the flu shot can affect your cardiovascular system because vaccination stimulates an acute inflammatory response in your body, which affects LDL oxidation and arterial function. So what do people think that means? They didn't say it in the study, but what this says right here is you're at increased risk of a heart attack. Because LDL oxidation and decrease in arterial function, myocardial infarction. So next, so unvaccinated children built up more antibodies against a wider variety of flu strains than vaccinated children. This is the Journal of Virology. So taking a look at the unvaccinated population versus the vaccinated for the flu shot, you developed actually, if you didn't get the flu shot, you're going to have more antibodies to broader range spectrum. So what they found out then was confirmed that the seasonal flu vaccine actually weakens children's immune system and increases their chance of being sick from other influenza viruses. So I can't understand when you have all this research out there, I can understand if you're looking at it from a money and politics perspective, but if you take a look at just the research out there, it doesn't make sense of where the recommendations are at. 5 studies done in Canada and the Canadian province also confirmed in Hong Kong that you're twice as likely with swine flu to receive the regular flu vaccine. At the Interscience Conference of Antimicrobial Agents and Chemotherapy, researchers reported a group that received the vaccine but got infected with a different flu strain and became significantly sicker than others who weren't vaccinated. So here's another one that basically SIDRAP is what it's called. All the 3 studies that were done between 2011 and 2012 flu vaccine, basically, vaccine provided kind of modest protection at first, but its effectiveness dropped pretty significantly 3 to 4 months in. So if you got inoculated basically in September, the further on you went, the less likely you were to be basically protected. So initially it was 38% protection By the time February hit, it was -1. Does people understand what -1% means? You're more likely to get the flu than if you didn't get the vaccine. Is literally what that statement means. Is once it hits past that 0 point, you're more likely to get something. So we talked a little bit about the Cochrane collaboration. Basically, at best, vaccines might be effective against only influenza A and B, which represent about 10% of all circulating viruses causing flu symptoms. The combined results of these trials show that under ideal conditions, vaccine completely matching the circulating viral configuration, 33 adults need to be vaccinated to avoid one set of influenza symptoms. On average, if a partial match, it's 100 people who need to be vaccinated to avoid one set of influenza symptoms. The vaccine did not affect the number of people hospitalized or working or days lost caused, and then what it also does is it causes Guillain-Barré. So if you take a look at the number of vaccines sold versus the number of causes of Guillain-Barré in through here, which is pretty much a life-threatening, there's very few people who actually recover 100%, but it's a demyelination of your neurons, so if it gets as bad as it can, you're going to be on respirators, breathing tubes, and that's if you survive. So, did people learn something so far? So what can we do? Because obviously just getting the flu vaccine really isn't, in my opinion, a great option to prevent the flu. And what the thing is these are all studies. These are things that I've looked at to say, hey, let me make an educated decision about this rather than just following some sort of uneducated, like someone's telling me to do this, let me just follow the herd and do it here. But it's like realistic, when you start looking at the research, you can start making an educated decision. You can start making better choices for yourself. I mean, just the fact that it's like, it causes inflammation in the system, there's heavy metals in through there. It's like, I don't understand, why people think, why is this a good public health option in that sense, where there's so many other things that we could do that would have such a greater impact. If you just took the dollars invested in that and put it into something that actually creates health. They took, if you just took a look at like Africa, for instance, the number of dollars that go into those vaccines that they're distributing over there, if you took that, even a quarter of that dollar value that they're spending on that and just invested into clean water for those people, you would completely overhaul society over there, because they know clean water, they know basically sanitation and stuff like that has the greatest impact on disease morbidity, disease mortality, stuff like that, versus just, okay, well now I'm immune to this, and everything works the way it's supposed to, but it doesn't protect you from everything else, it doesn't actually create health. So what can we do? So these are the 5 basic components of things that we can do for ourselves to be healthy. So I'm going to actually start with S. We're going to start from the back and kind of work forward. So sleep. So for those of you who like to take notes, this will be a great time to start taking more notes. Or for those who have iron traps in their brain, keep those ears open so you can trap more of that information. So sleep is how your body heals. Sleep is how your body rejuvenates. If you're not sleeping, you're not allowing your body to recover and heal from the day. You're not allowing your brain to recover and heal from the day. So how much sleep do you actually need? 7 to 9 hours of continuous sleep. That's what researchers show. Yes, there are going to be kind of the random person, like somehow can function with 4 hours of sleep and they consistently do that. But I can tell you right now, that is not average. So you want to compare yourself to probably where you're at, not some person who's like way outside the box. Kids need more, sick need more, if you're stressed you need more. So here's really when you don't get proper sleep, this is what it does to your system. The main one here is just because it is kind of what the class is about. Weakens the immune system. Doesn't allow the body to get proper healing, doesn't allow the immune system, the nervous system to communicate back and forth properly. So those things get shut down. Increases stress hormones, increases insulin levels. So, if you want to become diabetic, stop sleeping. If you want to improve your blood sugar levels, get sleep. Think about it. Your brain is the primary consumer of energy of your body every single day. What does the brain use? It uses sugar. So if you're tired and your brain is saying, hey, I need more energy, what do you think the body's going to do? release more sugar into the blood to try to give your brain as much fuel as it can to make it through in the situation it's at. What do you think is going to happen though if that is your habit long term? You're going to have blood sugar issues. So weakens the immune system, increases tumor growth. So it's like if you have now, I mean they've shown it increases tumor growth, increases weight gain, increases blood pressure, decreases your memory. And literally 1 night's loss of sleep is the equivalent of being intoxicated. So it's, you know, you think about this is another one where it's like I talked to my friends, you know, who went through the medical school, and they're doing their residency and stuff like that, and I had one friend that's just like, yeah, I worked 110 hours this week, and next week I'm supposed to work 115, and I'm like, how are you making good judgments? Like, I mean, you have a patient in front of you, and I mean, this is an ER doctor. You have a patient in front of you who, you know, they are requiring your best skill, your best judgment to survive, and you're functioning on virtually zero sleep. Like, how good of care is that person, you know, going to be giving you? Which is also why they know, you know, don't go to like a university hospital, because the increased risk of, you know, air, you know, stuff like medical malpractice, stuff like that. It's like, it's not like they're intentionally doing it. It's just accidents happen, but they know, I mean, you start decreasing sleep, accidents increase in, you know, happening in through there. Bad judgment, it's not their intention doing it, it's just mistakes happen. More mistakes happen when your brain isn't functioning. Shuts down human growth hormone. The most amount of human growth hormone, which is what allows your body to heal, muscles to recover, tendons to heal, stuff like that, is released while you sleep. So if all you did was saying, hey, you know what, I'm exhausted, my body's breaking down, I have chronic injuries, you just start saying, I'm going to start to sleep more, it's going to give your body the natural chance to start to heal itself on its own. So how do we actually get a good night's sleep? This is one much easier said than done for some people. My wife hates me sometimes because I think I'll be sleeping before my head hits the pillow. I'm one of those lucky people in that sense. But what do you need? And so even for me, where someone's like, okay, I can fall asleep immediately, but even if you're sleeping through these issues, they have an impact on the quality of sleep you're getting. So you need complete darkness if at all possible. You want to go in a pitch black room. It allows basically those hormones to basically start to regulate the system. It allows the body to start to shut down more, to go more into that growth cycle. Silence is huge. So if there's constantly noise here and there, constantly noise here, if you got pets that are coming in or barking or meowing or doing all the things they like to do at night when they're very active when you're trying to sleep, all of that is more and more interruptions. Maybe you have a spouse who snores next to you. I mean, that happens. They've shown that it's like, okay, you know, longevity, I mean, it's like, it might be time to consider a separate bedroom to really allow yourself to get the proper healing sleep that your body recovers and needs. So ideally, temp below 70 degrees. I think the ideal temperature is kind of like low 60s. If it goes a little bit below that, then you start to decrease the quality of sleep, because shivering and other stuff and just the air, the body gets a little bit more tense is what they found out. Set a bedtime routine. No TV before bed. If you're someone who you want to basically do calming activities. Really, if you're someone who can't sleep very well, absolutely no caffeine afternoon, because all of those are stimulants. It starts to wear the nervous system down. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if, how many people here, it's like you stayed up too late, you're exhausted, but then you can't fall asleep. It's like you almost have to recover energy before you can actually fall asleep, because you're so wiped and so run down, because the system actually, it takes energy to kind of get into the sleep cycle. So if you're completely wiped, completely burnt out, the sleep quality decreases as well too. And decreased stress. Stress has a major impact on basically those sleep cycles in through there. Any questions yet?
The EMF.
Oh, yeah, I didn't cover that one. Yeah. So check for EMF. So EMF has been shown to affect the pineal gland, which releases serotonin and which melatonin through there. So if you're in a high EMF zone, like you don't ever want to sleep with the Wi-Fi router in your room. Let's say you got like 20 cell phone towers, outside your window. All of that can have an impact on how your body is able to shut down, how it's able to regulate itself. You don't want to sleep, you don't want to use your cell phone as an alarm. If you have to use your cell phone as an alarm, put it on airplane mode and put it as far away from you as possible. Typically what they say is, I mean, from a safety perspective, you want your cell phone basically, if you can reach it when you're sitting there, it's too close to you, from an EMF perspective. There's a lot of other things that I can run into detail with EMF. I mean, I know Dr. Klinghardt, he's huge into the functional medicine world of helping people recover from chronic diseases. He tries to get people under 5 milliwatts of basically EMF, basically like exposure from the surrounding field. So he'll literally have people flip the breaker in their house at night. There's paints you can get that you can paint the walls that actually block that signaling out. There's curtains you can get that block that out. Now that you have basically you have smart meters for basically the power system, so that's constantly listening to radio frequency. So if your bed is, maybe the meter's outside, but you don't necessarily realize your bed in your head is just like you're sleeping next to this transmitter, basically, that can create problems. Not only that, but if you say, you got this giant, apartment complex that's being built over here, maybe you're the unfortunate person whose room is near where all that power comes in, and now you have 15, 20, 30 meters coming at the same place with that smart technology. Now you have this gigantic field set up. So there's a lot of impacts that it has on the system. So did that answer your question?
Yes.
All right. I literally could do a whole class on this. If you want to read, if you want to learn more about this, if you just Google Klinghardt and EMF, you'll find a bit, like literally it's an hour-long video that he goes through how EMF exposure and stuff like that affects the body.
A or C?
What's that?
How do you spell his name?
Klinghardt. So, on to the D of the needs, diet. Think about this. I mean, if you owned a race car, would you buy cheap, crappy gas and stick that into it? If you owned, I mean, if you bought one of the $200,000 sports car, would you ever put junky stuff into it? No. Why not? Because you value that. Why is your body not that much more important to you than even this object? I mean, you can buy a new car, but you can't buy a new body. So let's honor it with basically with the right nutrients. Because think about this. It's like if you're eating sugar, if you're eating candy, eating stuff like that, that's what your eye cells are making themselves out of. What do you want your eyes, your kidneys, your liver? What do you want that making itself out of? Do you want it making it out of junk, garbage, McDonald's, stuff like that? Probably not. So next thing too is water. We need to make sure that we're getting water. I mean, we're in a high altitude desert here, basically. You need to make sure you're getting proper amounts of water. We run bioelectrical impedance analysis on people every single day through here. And I can't tell you, probably the vast majority of people through here are dehydrated in one way, shape, or form. So cells cannot function appropriately when your body doesn't have the water to be able to do that. That's what helps create that fluid membrane, helps create the osmolarity of the cells and stuff like that. So diet. This is one that kind of floored me, so I wanted to kind of show you guys it as well too, where I mean, we already know that basically our diet sucks. I mean, the thing is most people in the U.S., the vast majority, I think it's like 90%, almost like 92% of people, actually think they're eating healthy. But what research shows is it's less than 10% of people are actually eating healthy. So if you just take a look at that, look around the room. If you're the one person who's actually eating healthy, then probably everyone else isn't. So I know I'm eating healthy, so I don't know about you guys. But I hope. I mean, we have a different population here. We really work on coaching you guys, helping you guys make the right decisions, and we have the whole 8 Weeks to Wellness program to really overhaul that stuff now as well too. But think about this. Once again, it's like, you want the proper nutrients in your system. I mean, think about this. I mean, if your body is lacking a nutrient that it needs for some enzyme to function appropriately, and your cholesterol is elevated from that, is giving any form of cholesterol med ever going to fix the problem that's really there? No. And every single aspect, every single function of the body is regulated by minerals, regulated by vitamins, regulated by water. all these different things that it needs nutrients to function appropriately. And if you're starving it, if you're nutrient depleted, the body isn't going to function right. That's why, I mean, when you take a look, it's like, why does someone consume like an entire bag of potato chips, or consume like an entire, this thing that has like absolutely almost no nutrient value in there? Maybe there's this much in it, but you need to consume this much to get that small amount of nutrient that the body's craving and needs. So, before I got ahead of myself here. So, basically what they've shown, kids aren't getting the fruits and vegetables that they need, not even close. Basically they're getting tons of processed garbage. And really it's affecting pretty much everyone. Colorado is a little bit kind of outside the box in the sense that the vast, we're kind of, the rest of the country is getting more and more obese. We seem to be kind of this pocket, I think, because a lot of people move here because they like to be outdoors, they like to exercise, they like to do things, and it's a beautiful place to do that. So we really don't have excuses. But does anyone, any guess what the number one vegetable is that gets consumed? Potato.
It's ketchup.
Yeah, and ketchup's the number one fruit. So, because tomatoes are grown on vines, so technically a fruit, not a vegetable, in through there. So, why? Is because you got your French fries and you have basically the ketchup that people eat them with. So to me, and when you take a look at the school food stuff, like they literally consider pizza a vegetable. I don't understand how they got that passed, but they did. Cancer study. I put this one in here because girls aged 3 to 5, if they, if they eat 1 serving of French fries per year, their risk of, let me make sure it was, so the risk of cancer goes up 25%, breast cancer later in life. And that's just eating 1 serving of French fries a week. So.
How do they connect those dots? That's pretty spectacular.
It is, isn't it? That's
Was
why
that one of the good studies or one of the not so good studies?
Depends your viewpoint. I consider it a good study because it helps you understand the impact of eating crappy food, and what you do as a kid has an impact on you as an adult. So,
does it matter if it's a processed fry or an actual potato fry and what kind of oil it's cooked in?
The study didn't necessarily determine that.
Because there are several different versions of fries.
Oh, there's many different versions of fries. I mean, there's the true like deep fried and stuff like that.
There's actually liquid fries, if you guys.
Liquid
fries, there really is.
Yeah, it's kind of gross. If it sounds gross, it's probably not good for you. Yes, let's move on. So, really, where do you want to be getting your nutrients from? Where do you want to be getting your food from? So you want to eat organic as possible, and you want to eat organic food that is grown as locally as possible as well too. Because the longer that something sits in the truck, sits on the shelf, its nutrient load is going down the toilet. It's part of the challenge. So like vitamin cottage, let's pick on them, or natural grocers, I think is what they're calling themselves now. Is like Lee and I, it's like we like to go there. They have cheaper than Whole Foods by a lot. It helps the money go further, especially when you got family, stuff like that. But commonly, when you take a look at their produce, it's like, how long has this been sitting here? It's wilted, it's kind of raw, it's like, it's mushy. It's like the nutrient quality of that is going to be very low versus something that just came off the vine, just came off, out of the orchard, wherever it came from. The longer it sits there, the more nutrient depleted it's going to be. But the thing is if you want to always eat organic, the reason is because you're going to be avoiding a pesticide load. Because when they take a look at conventionally grown stuff, just about everything has pesticides on it. You can Google a list of foods which are going to be more safe compared to other foods that are going to be less safe relative to pesticide load. The simple way to look at it is the thicker the skin, typically you're going to have a better chance of it being okay, because if you got a thick skin, you can basically peel the pesticide off. But grapes, they got a thin skin. It doesn't matter how much you wash it off, it is in it. And then when you got the GMO stuff, well, it's straight up being grown in it in itself. So, not only that, the GMO stuff, what they showed too was the bacteria in your gut can literally uptake that DNA that's producing whatever neurotoxin or herbicide or whatever it's doing. It literally has the ability to show that it sorry to be gross, but they did it with people with colostrum bags, basically, where they don't have a large intestine. So, and what they showed was basically those people's guts were actually producing pesticides in the gut, because that bacteria took up that DNA, which was the DNA that they transposed into this plant that was never supposed to be able to take it up. They've shown that the GMO stuff is jumping species, stuff like that. There's different plants now that are completely herbicide resistant because they took up the genes that were from the GMO corn, stuff like that. I mean, we have basically, I would consider, in my opinion, the worst food supply in the U.S. of any other country, as far as like nutrient load. I mean, I'm not necessarily comparing this to maybe Somalia where you just don't have food, but as far as like when you take a look at the quality of what we have, it is horrible. I mean, they know that. I mean, just conventional farming, independent of, just take the pesticide load out of it. I mean, basically foods themselves, like plants, like fruits, stuff like that. I mean, on average, you're taking about 30 different, not necessarily minerals, but basically compounds out of the soil when you're growing something. You know, fertilizers put in 3. Now, for any of you who have a bank account, if you're taking 30 out and putting in 3, it's not very hard to realize that in the very near future, you're going to be depleted. Your funds are going to run out. And that's part of the problem that we're doing with conventional farming. So even independent of the pesticide load, the nutrient load is getting depleted. What they showed, and this was even early 2000s, like to get the same amount of calcium in a cup of spinach then, you'd have to eat basically 50, or I should say, the same amount of calcium from a cup of spinach from, like, I think it was 1925 or maybe it was 50s. It was like 50 years basically, at least before that. It was 50 cups of it that you had to eat to get the same amount of calcium. They showed that people who were nutrient depleted, they stuck them on the 100% pure organic diet. And even with the best organic diet, they weren't able to get those nutrient loads back up, which is why, one of the reasons why we take a look at supplementing and try to add that in, because our soil has become so depleted that it's virtually impossible, once you become nutrient depleted, to actually get those nutrient loads back up. The key is just don't get depleted in the first place, which is, what depletes it is eating, processed sugar, processed wheat, all these things that basically are devoid of nutrients into there. Avoid boxed or bagged foods. I mean, if it comes in a box, it's more than likely dead. It's really something that typically the more processed it is, the harder it is to digest, the harder for the body to break down, and then we're not able to basically utilize that. Avoid excess sugar. So typically when we're taking a look at our 8 weeks to wellness clients into here, in week 1 and through here, we're getting rid of all the inflammatory foods. We're just basically saying, you know what, 1 week, you gotta cut the crap out. Because then that's where we're seeing 10 pounds, 20 pounds of weight loss. It's not quite 20, but we'll see Matt like up to 15 into there, because what's happening is the body's just dumping piles of toxins. The inflammation is coming out of the system. You can see that in a BIA where it's like, okay, where is someone's actually kind of their fat content? Where is their toxicity load? And if someone's toxicity load is really high, we'll see a lot of people where a lot of excess weight isn't necessarily fat, it is inflammation of the system. You get rid of the inflammatory factors, well now, I mean, yeah, they're having weight loss. They're not necessarily having fat loss yet, but they're having weight loss because the inflammation is coming out of the system. I mean, what sort of devastating effect is that chronic inflammation having on the system? That's where they're taking a look at heart disease, Alzheimer's, dementia. All these things are chronic inflammatory diseases, and that's, they're promoting aspirin as the savior, part of this, but it's like you're not dealing with underlying issue, which is what's creating that there. So things that we'll cut out: gluten, dairy, eggs, peanuts, corn, soy. Corn and soy. I mean, it's virtually, unless you're getting organic, you're going to be getting GMO. Basically, is really what it comes down to. Boxes don't have to label it. I will say this though, which is, if it says organic on it, it can't have any GMO stuff in it. So that's one way to know if it says organic anywhere on the label, USDA organic. And if it gives the label, the USDA organic label stamp, basically, over basically 95% of the ingredients have to be organic. So it's so it technically isn't 100%, it's 95%. If it says 100% organic, then it's 100% organic. But there is things to become aware of with labeling. When you take a look at fruits and vegetables, if there's a 9 in front of it. So typically it's a 4-digit number. If it's a 5-digit number with a 9 in front of it, that means it's organic. Because I've been to King Supers more than once where you're trying to find the organic stuff and it says organic, you look at the label like, oh, they stuck this in the wrong spot, and it doesn't have the organic label on it.
Are you talking about the codes on the?
Yep, the codes of
scanners?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Starts with a 9.
It starts with a 9, it's organic. Well, no, if it's 9 and it's a 5-digit code. I don't know every single code. I don't know if there's any 4-digit ones that might start with a 9, but it needs to be a 5-digit code that starts with a 9.
Okay.
If it starts with an 8, it's genetically modified. I have never seen, in all the years of my shopping, I've never seen a GMO piece of produce or fruit being sold as such.
Right.
Most of that stuff ends up in like canned tomatoes or canned, French fries, stuff like that, eggs, stuff like that. I mean, stuff that they don't have to label it.
What about the eggs?
Eggs are one where we've done lots of allergy testing. I don't 100% understand this one. This is my theory as far as what we see. So many people got vaccinated as kids, got vaccinated at some stage in their life. They're growing stuff on eggs and through there. My theory is that basically the eggs, there's cross-contamination between egg protein and what's in the vaccine, which is creating the egg allergy. Because the vast majority of people that we're doing food allergy panels on have an egg allergy, which is why we stuck that on that list.
So just so I'm really clear on, are you saying generally to all people avoid all these things in your diet? Gluten, eggs?
Not necessarily at all times. I think eggs are a great source of food, stuff like that. Dairy, I mean, the thing is, the vast majority of people are lactose intolerant. The older we get, we just don't have lactase anymore. If you're a celiac or have any the gluten challenges, you're going to be dairy intolerant basically, because the villi that are supposed to sit up like this, when you get that gluten tolerance or basically celiacs, they lay like this. The lactase is on the end of the villi, so the lactase can't even get to the lactose, and so that's one of the challenges. Not only that, but when you're dumping in with dairy, the instant you pasteurize stuff, you're breaking down a lot of the enzymes, stuff like that, so it's in a much more unnatural form for the body to actually process, so then it just becomes basically sugar and fat in through there. So then you have a lot of free sugar in through there. If you have bad bacteria in the gut, which there's always bacteria in the gut. You need bacteria in the gut to be healthy. But if the good are outweighing, or if the bad are outweighing the good, well then you're just feeding more and more of the bad. You can get yeast overgrowth from the lactose through there because it's basically sugar that your system is not able to break down. So the only way that it's getting broken down is through the bacteria that's in the gut. Creates a lot of bloating, a lot of inflammation through there. We see tons and tons of people with casein allergies as well through there. Peanuts, both peanuts and corn are very high, can be very high in mycotoxins as well too. So if someone is having a mold challenge, nuts are really kind of a no-no, corn as well too. So, more questions?
Is that due to the storage issues, the big silos that they're all doing?
A little bit. I mean, I was chuckling because I went over they were selling like these ears of corn or like the corn stalks and whatever, like at Home Depot, and I was just like, you couldn't even pay me to even put that near my home because it's like the stalk itself, it's like you can just see the mold on it. And it's just like, it's black, it's dehydrated, but it's still black. If you get it wet, it's going to start spore producing through there. Same thing with the ears and stuff too, the corn. So we're still on diet. Vitamin D3. The reason I break this one out is because they're looking at creating a universal vaccine for viruses, basically viruses or the fluid through there. What are they trying to do? Is through the vaccine is increase the CD8 count. Well, the CD8 count is they know which is basically it's an immune cell more or less that they know that if you have high CD8 cell counts, you're pretty much unlikely to get the flu, and if you do, it's going to be not intense at all. So it's basically you're in a much healthier state from an immune response relative to the flu. What does vitamin D do? It increases the CD8 immune cells. So that's why one of the many reasons why vitamin D is so important. Vitamin D is more of a hormone than it is necessarily a vitamin. because of all the different functions on it. It's I think of one of only 2 different chemicals that every single cell of the entire body has a cell receptor for. So that makes it pretty important. Basically it produces 200 to 300 different antimicrobial peptides in the body that kill bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So, vitamin D alone, once again, huge immune boosting capabilities in through there. And they took a look at children basically just giving them a low dose of vitamin D, basically D3, you want D3, not D2, of vitamin D in through here. They were able to basically decrease flu 42% in through there. Much more significant outcomes than the studies that we were looking at.
So checking vitamin D now is sort of the rage in terms of preventive health screening.
Yep.
Is it D3 that they're looking for, or?
It depends on who's looking. I've seen tests where they broke it. If the cholecalciferol, that's D3. Ergocalciferol is D2. That is fungus grown, fungus based. So if you do have like a vegan in here, they do have now vegan D3 supplements, but D3 it comes from lanolin. Or that's the way they produce it, is they utilize that. So if you're vegan, then, I don't know if there's a vegan here, but if you are vegan, that's just something to be aware of where D3 comes from. I think they found an LJ source now that they're able to convert over. So, but where do you want your levels? I will say this, medically speaking, they put their low level at 30. 30, you're going to still be very deficient. You're not going to be hitting those immune responses. And when we're taking a look at basically someone's D3 levels, we want to see in 65 to 85. I know of some doctors who are working with cancer patients, they want their levels up into the low 100s. So how do we know if we're getting, hence, that's like the warning down through here is like, you need to make sure you're checking your vitamin D levels. I will say this, from what I've seen from toxicity lows, it's virtually impossible to OD on vitamin D. I think what they said, I think the one thing I saw was like 450 million IU per day is where you're going to start to hit a toxic load. And it's like, even the high dose, medically speaking, 50,000 IUs a day, you're not going to get there. So here's kind of the recommendation. Age matters. Honestly, it's going to be a little bit more about weight, but typically, most kids below 5 are a certain weight, same thing with 5 to 10. Here's kind of what you're looking for kids below 5, 35 units per pound per day. That's kind of what you're going to be looking at for any of you who have grandkids or kids. I don't think anyone has young kids in here. Adults, at least 5,000 IUs. Typically, when we're working with someone, we're going to be looking at 8,000. Winter months, you're going to need at least 8,000 or you're going to be dropping. And then same thing with pregnant women as well too. So, where do we see here?
Are we in winter yet?
Trying to think here. So, something to be aware of too with vitamin D is just because you're getting tan doesn't necessarily mean you're getting vitamin D. Here's what can happen is because the sun needs to hit a certain angle in order for basically your body to be able to create vitamin D from that. I don't remember exactly when it is, but I think it's kind of mid-November to mid-February for us in Colorado where that is actually at. You can get online, I think it's like an aeronautical website or something like that, which actually shows you, like tells you basically the height of where the angle of the sun is hitting. So depending on where the angle of the sun is hitting, because here's what happens. It's a different UV length that tans you versus what actually creates the vitamin D. So you can be getting tan, you might be very tan in the winter months, even though you're not getting D from that, or the appropriate amounts of D into there. There's other things sunlight does too, other than just create vitamin D. It can sulfate basically cholesterol. They've shown that it actually turns on cancer suppressing stuff. So it's like, I take a look at it, it's like, granted, once you have skin cancer, there's certain challenges you need to kind of precautionary, you don't want to burn, stuff like that, but getting sunlight can actually suppress tumor growth, can actually it turns on basically, I'm trying to think, it wasn't P450, it was one of the basically enzymes that regulate basically tumor suppression and literally killing tumor growth through there, so.
The bottom statement on that blood level of 25 OHD, would you just
This is
Interpret
25 hydroxy, basically vitamin D. This is when they take a look at it from a scientific perspective. This is what you're looking at. The 25 hydroxy D3 basically. So calcitriol. So if someone has low levels of vitamin D, and you know that their levels should be okay, something to take a look at is calcitriol, which is the active form of vitamin D. So, which basically means there's acute infection going on within the system that the body's trying. So we got through sleep, we got through diet, and now we have 3 more. So I'll try to move quick since it's kind of getting late. Next one is attitude. So you got to have the right attitude. You got to have the positive mental attitude. Attitude is everything. Literally, they've shown that it can add 7 years onto your life having a positive mental attitude. If you're in a situation, if you have the right attitude going through it, whatever outcome you think is going to happen, it's typically the impact that it's going to have on your system. So I love this kitty because it's just like, you have a smile on your face when you see this thing. So think right, choose health, choose life. Thinking right and making the right choices impacts each of the magnificent 5 that we're going to ultimately get to. So positive mental attitude. So here's what happens. I want to talk about stress a little bit. Stress has a huge negative impact basically on the immune system itself, especially long term. It creates autoimmunity when the immune system starts attacking yourself. So really, what is stress? Stress initiates the fight, flight, or freeze response into here. So here's really what happens. The adrenaline is released, blood sugar elevates, blood pressure rises, pulse increases, muscle tense, pupils dilate. You used to think immunity turns off. This is no longer the case. It's actually ready, so it's just sitting in this kind of ready state. Thing is if you think about long term, like every single one of these, which is kind of what I took a look at here, when this stuff gets stuck on, basically digestion turns off, sexual function turns off. Think about these. When every single one of these gets stuck on, this is important. Like if you're going to eat by a line, you need your body to mobilize the energy to the right place for you to get away. You don't need to be thinking about the meaning of life. You don't need to be basically even processing necessarily that much information. You need to get away from the situation right now. Great short-term strategy, very bad long-term strategy when we're living in a stress environment. And this is why it's the cause of 95% of the diseases, because when you take a look at here, when you take a look at all of these, this is where stuff is getting stuck on. It's over-adapted, it's overcompensated, it's no longer able to regulate itself. And that's where we see these anxiety, depression, diabetes, hypertension, cardiac arrhythmia, fibromyalgia, neck and back pain, vision issues, immune-related diseases, irritable bowel, constipation, indigestion, impotency, infertility. The list could go on and on and on, and it's really because the system is no longer able to regulate itself. Sonia, I can get you the slide too if you really want. I don't know that you'll get a good picture of all the little words.
Got it.
So stress. Hahn, he's kind of the one who really ultimately defined stress, really put it on the map in the sense of how is it impacting your system, what's happening. And what he did is he defined stress in really 2 different ways. Distress. Distress is basically what we just talked about. The stress that is having a negative impact on the system. Stress that's having, it's becoming overwhelming, you're in a stressful job, stressful situation, stuff like that. Thing is, there's also eustress, which enhances function, physical or mental. So gravity, I'll use the astronauts in space as this example. Gravity is a good stress to us. Maybe when you're 90 years old, it can be a little bit more challenging. But what does it do? It helps keep our bones strong. Because the astronauts in space, because they don't have that gravity, they don't have that stress, chronic, physical stress being applied to the system, they start to rapidly lose their bones, which is why go through such significant exercise protocols when they're up in space for any extended period of time. Not only that, but basically, think about exercise. Exercise is a eustress. Your body's adapting positively to a stress that you're applying to it. It's responding the way it needs to. It's adapting to get your system to be more healthy. So that's what eustress is. It's really keeping the right attitude can literally make a situation go from eustress to distress or distress from eustress. If you have a mission, if you have a purpose, if you have a vision, if you're doing something for some reason, it can take a stressful situation that's distress and turn it into eustress because You know the outcome. You know the outcome that you want to achieve. So even though it's maybe some lawsuits that someone's with, something horrible or something like that, but if you know it's for some sort of bigger picture, bigger vision, that's what helps motivate someone to get to that other side to have that positive outcome. So I love Henry Ford's comment basically because whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. So, and this one really reigns true when it comes to stress, and realize what is the mental talk you're telling yourself each day. What does that look like? What things are being repeated over and over and over in your brain? Are they good things? Are they bad things? I mean, if a friend was saying this to you, would you have that person as your friend? Maybe they'd be your best friend. What are you telling yourself each day? Because they've shown with Bruce Lipton's work, biology belief, the thoughts that you have literally can change your genetic expression. So you need to have the right attitude. So stress basically goes into your cerebral cortex, shuts down brain to the frontal cortex, decreases your body's ability to make decisions, and basically the underlying more primitive parts of your brain are really in control of your situation. So I already talked about having a purpose. So this one I just heard about literally, I think it was yesterday, so I created a slide for tonight. They took a look at nursing home residents, and one group, which was the control group, they basically gave them the plant, stuck them in their room, and they basically said, okay, the staff is going to take care of this plant. The next group, they gave the plant to, and they said, you are responsible for watering it, and you're taking care of this plant. And everything else, nothing else changed. In 1 year, the group that was taking care of their plant, the death rate in that group was less than half. Just from a plant. So that it's like, even though it's something little, gave them some sort of little meaningful purpose, something that they're taking care of, had a huge impact on how their body was processing stuff. So it's like, what's your purpose? What's your vision? What are you doing? What are you passionate about? That's what they've shown with the blue zones. I don't know if any of you guys remember that book, the blue zones. What they did is they studied cultures or groups of people who lived to 100. What were some of the commonalities? Having a purpose was one of the huge commonalities in there. Why did someone want to continue to exist? What were they driving for? Having some sort of underlying meaning, giving purpose to their life's work, what they're doing, significantly improve their longevity and their quality of life as well too. So think about this. For maybe some of you where it's like, okay, maybe I'm retired. Think about what's your purpose. Where do you want to be 10 years from now? What do you want that to look like? What are things that you can do to have a greater impact that's going to bring you, a greater level of well-being? Maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's doing this, maybe it's work. I can't answer that for you. That's individualized to every single person. But figuring out what is that purpose, what's your greater mission, what sort of impact are you actually having? So now we're on to the E, so exercise. So I'll talk a little bit about this one because it's getting late, but basically movement is life, life is movement. The instant somebody's body stops moving, it starts breaking down. It doesn't matter at what age, because they've shown the instant like a joint. I'll just use this study that I remember from chiropractic school. Sadly it was rabbits. What they did is they took their knees, they drilled holes into their knee with literally a drill. And what they did is they had 3 different groups. They had the control group, which they just let them hobble around. They had one group that they put into a cast. And then they had another group that they hooked up to. It was this like funny type of wheel where their leg went round and round and round and round. The group that hobbled around, their knee improved a little bit, but there was definitely a lot of damage still left in there. The group that got casted, the knee was completely destroyed, non-functional. The group that was hooked up to the wheel, there was no sign that there was ever damage done to that joint ever. That's with the drill where they drilled holes into the actual cartilage, into the knee. So it's very important to make sure that you're moving to allow your body to continue to heal. I mean, think about it. Synovial fluid is really how that joint's getting the nutrients in through there. If there's no synovial fluid being moved around, what sort of nutrients is it getting? None. I mean, because it's gonna take it out, and then if it's gonna be nutrient depleted, you gotta be replacing that. So here's where we take a look at basically from an exercise perspective. Exercise has 3 pillars. I need to change this order of this, because to me, flexibility and mobility is going to be primary. And the reason I say that is because if your body doesn't have proper range of motion, and then you put any sort of load, any sort of exercise, any sort of weight resistance, you're lifting a weight, it's not going through the proper range of motion. It's going to wear out, it's going to break down in ways that it's shown. It's just like your car. If your car's out of alignment, you start driving around, it's going to break down, tires are going to wear out. When it's shown, you're going to have these issues. So that's why I take a look at flexibility and mobility. That I always take a look at primary, but each of these are equally as important. Cardiovascular health, you need cardiovascular health. That is basically endurance training. But it's not just a matter of I'm going to get on the treadmill for an hour and just push myself and keep my heart rate up there. Because what they've shown is they used to think like, okay, someone's having heart disease. So, okay, what do? Go run a marathon. You're going to be ultra healthy. Well, not so much, because what they're finding out now is people who are pushing themselves at that sustained elevated heart rate, it's actually causing heart damage long term. So what they're showing now is the high intensity interval training is having a much greater impact on somebody's system, where it's like, I'm elevating up to here, I'm dropping down to here. And it's because what you want to do is you need to create this oscillation. It's the body's ability to function in a wider range that actually creates the health, not just the ability to be able to sustain an elevated heart rate. That's where they're finding out that health actually comes from. And you can actually get a workout in 20 minutes of what the equivalent of like an hour would be of the sustained endurance, basically. If you're training for marathons, stuff like that, which I don't know that too many people in here are going to necessarily be doing that. There are different factors that are going to play into there, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do HIIT training and I'm going to go run a marathon. You still need to basically get your body prepared for that. But realize that, you know, bang for your buck, you're going to get way more out of the HIIT type, which is the high intensity interval training. Then resistive training too. You need to make sure you're lifting weights. I don't care, you know, if you're the smallest female in the world or the biggest man. It's like you need to make sure that you're doing this, because it increases bone health. It forces your bodies to lay down more bone to help support itself. It's one of the reasons why, if you take a look at like obesity into there, it's maybe possibly the only benefit of obesity is it's actually helping the body to create stronger bones, because you have all this additional weight. So every time you take a step, there's more force on the system, which then the body says, hey, I need stronger bones to support myself. Same principle is if you can get that resistive exercise into there, you're going to create stronger bones long term. You're going to create more muscle mass. One of the number one things that they know as far as aging goes is sarcopenia, which is just loss of muscle mass. If you're able to maintain your muscle mass, basically your aging is going to be significantly decreased. And they took a look at people age 85, and if they started exercising at 85, they were still able to gain muscle mass. So you're never too late to start. Granted, you need to do it in a healthy way, because obviously if an injured joint, injured knee, something like that, it's not just a matter of, oh, I'm going to beat myself up and push myself through that, because you don't want to be doing more damage. That's why the flexibility and mobility is so important, and why we've coached our trainers, taught our trainers that like, we need to do this work first, we need to do posture prep stuff, we need to get the body in the right place, ready to start to push itself. So the old recommendation is 3 to 4 times a week for 30 minutes. Basically, if you were doing that, we're kind of saying even if you did a little bit more than that, you're going up. If you're doing less than that, you're going to go down. The new recommendation is we need to get about 1 hour of exercise at least 6 days a week, because we are so inactive as a society.
Dr. Oz says we can exercise 10 minutes at a time, and then it can be cumulative.
Well, 10 minutes time, but if you're accumulating it through the day,
Yes.
so that's where your high intensity interval training is going to be. But my challenge with something like that is if someone doesn't have proper range of motion, doesn't have proper flexibility, you're not going to be able to properly warm the system up to be able to get into that. Someone who's in a healthy state, it's like you can do chunks here, you can do chunks there. Realize like, okay, maybe I do half an hour in the morning, maybe I do half an hour in the evening, maybe I do 15 minutes or 20 minutes at lunch and I can break up the rest. There's options everywhere. And when we take a look at like cardiovascular training, what you have to realize, this isn't necessarily walking. If you're really out of shape, it very well could be walking. But if you're in shape, which is what we want everyone in our office to be, is some aspect of health, walking's probably not going to be enough for you. So that's why we really encourage people to get heart rate monitors, because if you're not getting enough push, you're not getting the benefits of the cardiovascular through there. You can do cardiovascular and resistive training together technically. You can do like supersets where it's like, okay, I'm gonna do curls, I'm gonna do bench, I'm gonna do this exercise, add this exercise. And if you keep the intensity up, you can keep your heart rate into that cardiovascular zone while doing weight training. And the key is then so you're not just doing like 1,000 curls or something like that. It's like, okay, maybe I'm doing some here. The next exercise, I'm working a different muscle group. Then I'm working a different muscle group, and then maybe I'm coming back to this muscle group. So you're cycling through. So while you're in between, and you're technically resting a muscle group while you're engaging another muscle group. That's where you can really get the huge bang for your buck in like 10 minutes, 20 minutes into there. So if you're super short on time, you can stack all that stuff up on there. It's intense though. So, any other questions regarding exercise?
Yeah, what about using, instead of weight training, like body weight exercises, using your body weight?
They can be totally fine. Body weight it can be totally fine. It really just, as long as you're doing the exercise in an appropriate manner, that you're not stressing the joint in some, ineffective way or some way that's doing that. I mean, Pilates was basically based off, body weight